I'm at Boston right now. I gave a speech last night at Boston University on this topic. The topic was teach the ABCs, not the LGBTs. And the topic made people crazy. There were more shenanigans at this speech I gave last night than I've seen at a campus speech in years. First of all, the event was sold out, and then the captain of the BU Police Department wouldn't let half the audience into the room. The captain of the BU Police Department, I don't know what his axe was to grind, he wouldn't let our photographer into the room. So there actually aren't any even professional photos from the event. So you had half of the room was stuck outside, and they had to stream the speech on their phone. And then of the people who were let in, there was a planned walkout by the left-wing lunatic kids. I had an inkling of who those kids were going to be because they were the only people in the room with the masks. This does underscore my point, my favorite part about the airplane mask mandate being lifted, which is just that you can now tell with 100% certainty exactly who the libs are. So you just know, you're like, okay, I guess I'm sitting next to one lib and one normal person, and that's okay, that's fine. I'm just going to plan out my conversation now. I'm going to plan out my flight. So I'm looking and I see rows of these students wearing the masks, and I think, okay, they're going to stage some protest. And right when I got to the topic of the gender unicorn. The gender unicorn is this weird assignment about a purple sexually confused unicorn that is being handed out to third graders and second graders and kindergartners and even is being used in certain pre-K classrooms. The gender unicorn and the genderbread man. That's another weird, creepy, sexually confused cookie assignment. These are being used with really young kids. When I mentioned that, the kids stormed up and flipped me off and yelled and screamed and said all crazy things and waved the transgender flag and then walked out of the room. This issue makes people crazy. And the point I drove home last night at BU, you can watch my speech online. It's been streamed to YouTube. It's over at the YAF YouTube channel. The point I made here is that it's not enough just to stop the weird sex lessons in the classroom. You've got to go further. Teachers need to teach something. It's not enough just to say, hey, don't talk about transgenderism to 6-year-olds. Well, what are we going to talk about? If you're reading a story in a kindergarten classroom and the story is about a family of bears, Mama Bear, Daddy Bear, and Baby Bear, I don't think anyone would object to that, right? Even though the lesson does have implicit lessons about sex, about family, about human nature. Where did Baby Bear come from? Baby Bear came from Mama Bear and Daddy Bear, and Mama Bear and Daddy Bear live together in a marriage because that's a sort of ordinary, normal thing to do. Well, what if the story, instead, being read to this kindergarten classroom, were about Daddy Bear and Daddy Bear's boyfriend and Daddy Bear's boyfriend's polyamorous trans billy goat, and this were being read to 5-year-olds. Would we object to that? I think we probably would. We would. You say, no thank you, don't read that to my kid. Both stories make implicit claims and have implicit lessons about sex and family and human nature, but we like the normal one and we don't like the one with the trans billy goat. It's not just, as some Republicans are saying, it's not just this education law in Florida bans all sexual discourse entirely. Sometimes you'll hear Republicans say, you could call it the Don't Say Straight bill, because it doesn't discriminate between gay or straight or trans or this. It just says all sexual conduct is out. But I just don't think that's really what we're talking about here. I don't think that really gets to the heart of the issue. You can't teach anything, even all the way down to an elementary school classroom. You can't teach anything about history, literature, biology, certainly, civics. You can't teach these things if you don't touch on topics involving men and women and human nature. Those things are just too central. Sex and desire and family and community, those things are too central to the human condition to avoid. And so I think we've got to stand up and say, no, we have norms. Not saying we got to be mean to gay guys. Not saying we need to be cruel to people who are confused about their sex. But we're allowed to have norms. There's nothing bigoted about that. The reason that Republicans don't want to say any of these things is because we're afraid of being called a homophobe or a transphobe or a phobophobe or whatever nonsense slur the libs want to throw at us. But who cares? They're going to throw slurs at you anyway. And what we're standing up for is perfectly ordinary and normal, and everybody would have agreed with it 5 years ago. But now you go to a college campus and people lose their minds talking about a really basic fact of human nature. The craziest protests I've ever had, the only time I was physically assaulted on a campus, was talking about this issue. This issue where the Overton Window, as it's sometimes called, or the standards, have just completely changed to the point that now you're not allowed to say men and women are different. If you, for instance, if you go onto Twitter and you don't make the general claim that men and women are different, but you go in, you're retweeting Bruce Jenner. Bruce Jenner says, I'm a woman and I want to use the women's bathroom. Let's say he's actually one of the least offenders on this transgender ideology, but let's go with it. He's one of the most prominent ones. And he says, I want to use the women's bathroom, and you retweet that and you say, you are not a woman, Bruce Jenner. That's a violation of Twitter's terms of conduct. You could lose your Twitter account for that because the Overton window has shifted. But if you retweeted some, I don't know, straight white male and said you are a terrible person and you are an oppressor and you're the cause of all the evil in the world, you won't lose your Twitter account. The latter is objectively more offensive than the former. The latter is not true while the former is true, and yet you'll be banned for saying the true thing and you'll be fined for saying the false thing, which is why it's so important that we get a hold on Twitter and Facebook and Google and the big tech platforms that control our speech and therefore control our democracy. I'm so glad you liked that clip. If you want more clips, head on over and subscribe. Ring that bell. You'll get many more clips. Go subscribe to The Michael Knowles Show too. We'll see you next time.